Hey guys, imagine waking up tomorrow not in your cozy bed, but on a planet so hostile it makes your morning commute look like a spa day. We're talking environments that chew up human flesh like a cosmic blender, and today, we're diving into why yes, you, wouldn't last a day on any planet beyond Earth. From choking on Venus's acid sauna to freezing solid on Mars before you can say, I forgot my jacket. This is a sarcastic, brutal ride through the solar system's worst vacation spots. Buckle up, because survival isn't just unlikely, it's laughably impossible. Before you get comfortable, please hit like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's dive together into today's journey. Picture this. You're dropped onto Venus, our closest planetary neighbor, and the universe's equivalent of a toxic ex who never got over you. You step out of your hypothetical spaceship, feeling like Christopher Columbus discovering a new world, except this world hates you personally. The air, if you can call it that, is a thick soup of carbon dioxide, so dense it feels like you're swimming in a pressure cooker. The temperature? A balmy 900 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to melt lead and make your skin regret every life choice that led to this moment. Your spacesuit, assuming you've got one straight out of a sci-fi blockbuster, starts to groan under the pressure, 92 times that of Earth's atmosphere, like being crushed by a herd of invisible bureaucrats. The role of bureaucrats is to maintain the status quo. The job of the media is to change it. Let's hop in our imaginary spaceship and leave Venus's acid-soaked death trap behind, because frankly, you're already a puddle of regret there. Our next stop on this galactic tour of terrible ideas is Mars, the red planet that's been hyped up by sci-fi nerds and Elon Musk wannabes as humanity's next home. Spoiler alert, Mars is less new frontier and more desert of despair. You step onto its rusty iron oxide dusted surface, thinking you're Matt Damon in The Martian, ready to science the heck out of this place. But Mars has other plans, and they involve you becoming a human popsicle faster than you can say, I should have stayed on Earth. The temperature here averages a bone-chilling negative 80 degrees Fahrenheit, dipping lower at night. Your spacesuit, assuming it survived Venus's meltdown, is now your only defense against frostbite that'd make a 17th century Arctic explorer weep. Picture those poor souls on the Franklin expedition, lost in the icy Canadian wilderness, eating their boots for survival. Mars is like that, but without the boots, or any hope of rescue. The air is 95% carbon dioxide, so thin it's practically a vacuum, offering about as much breathable oxygen as a medieval dungeon. You take one gasp without your suit's oxygen supply, and your lungs collapse like a bad investment in a 14th century spice trade. Let's talk about the vibe. Mars looks like the love child of the Sahara Desert in a post-apocalyptic movie set. Red dust swirls around you, clogging every crevice of your suit, like the time you tried to taste the rainbow with a bag of expired yogurt. You think, maybe I'll find water. Good luck. Any water here is either frozen solid under the polar caps or hiding in trace amounts, mocking you like a mirage did to those crusaders trudging through the Holy Land, delusional and dehydrated. You decide to explore, because humans are stubborn, like those 19th century gold prospectors who died chasing shiny rocks in the Klondike. You stumble across a canyon, Valle Marineris, the Grand Canyon's angrier, bigger cousin. It's majestic, sure, but one wrong step, and you're tumbling down a chasm with no one to hear your screams, except maybe a bored NASA rover taking selfies in the distance. Radiation is your next uninvited guest. Without a magnetic field like Earth's, Mars lets solar and cosmic rays bombard you like you're a piñata at a particularly aggressive birthday party. Your cells start mutating faster than rumors in a 16th century royal court. Back then, people thought bleeding you with leeches cured everything. On Mars, you'd wish for leeches because at least they'd keep you company while you glow in the dark. You might think, I'll build a shelter. Cute. The soil is laced with perchlorates, toxic salts that'd make a Victorian chemist blush. Touch it without gloves, and it's like handling the arsenic-laced wallpaper that killed half of 19th century Europe. Even if you manage a shelter, the dust storms, think 60-mile-per-hour winds that last for months, will sandblast your dreams away. Imagine being a Viking settler in Greenland, watching your crops fail as the little ice age kicked in, except Mars doesn't even give you the courtesy of crops. You're hungry now, aren't you? Too bad. There's no food unless you count the cosmic dust bunnies. You'd starve faster than a peasant during the Great Famine of 1315, when people ate tree bark and prayed for mercy. Mars doesn't do mercy. It's a planet that looks at your survival instincts and laughs, like a Roman emperor watching gladiators get mauled. Let's say you're a Renaissance alchemist, convinced you can transmute Mars's rocks into gold, or, better yet, oxygen. You set up your little lab, muttering about the philosopher's stone, but all you get is a face full of regolith and a suffocation-induced headache. The thin atmosphere means sound barely travels, so your cries for help are as effective as a medieval town, crier in a ghost town. You're alone, cold, and irradiated, and it's only been a few hours. Night falls, and the temperature plummets to negative 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Your suit's heater, if it's still working, is burning through power like a 17th century witch trial burning through kindling. You're shivering, hallucinating about a warm tavern, like some poor soul lost in the Russian steppes during Napoleon's disastrous 1812 retreat. Back then, soldiers froze in their boots, and you're about to do the same. Except your boots are high-tech and still useless. You might think, I'll signal Earth. Sure, but the communication delay is 4 to 24 minutes, depending on orbital positions. By the time NASA gets your SOS, you're already a Martian icicle. Historically, humans have been terrible at surviving hostile environments without serious prep. Think of the Donner Party, stranded in the Sierra Nevada, resorting to cannibalism. On Mars, there's no one to eat unless you're eyeing your own frostbitten toes. The psychological toll is brutal too. Isolation on Mars is worse than being locked in the Bastille during the French Revolution. At least there, you had rats for company. Here, it's just you, the red dust, and the creeping realization that you're not the hero of this story. You're the cautionary tale. Let's pivot to Mercury, because why not trade freezing for frying? Mercury is the solar system's neglected stepchild, too close to the sun for comfort. Daytime temperatures hit 800 degrees Fahrenheit, hot enough to make Venus look like a beach resort. You step onto its cratered surface, feeling like a Spanish conquistador landing in the New World. Except the New World is a barbecue grill, and you're the main course. The sun looms huge in the sky, blasting you with radiation that'd make a Chernobyl survivor wince. Your suit, already battered from Venus and Mars, is now melting like a candle in a 15th century cathedral fire. Mercury's atmosphere is basically non-existent, a whisper of helium and sodium that's less useful than the hot air in a medieval debate about how many angels can dance on a pinhead. You try to move, but the ground is a mix of sharp rocks and powdery regolith, like walking on broken glass mixed with baby powder. One misstep, and you're bleeding out in a vacuum, which is about as fun as being drawn and quartered in Old England. The temperature swings are insane. Nighttime drops to negative 290 degrees Fahrenheit. Imagine being a sailor on a 17th century ship, stuck in the doldrums, then slammed by a hurricane. Mercury's like that, but with no water, just relentless heat and cold playing tag with your corpse-to-be. You might think, I'll hide in a crater, except those craters are baking in solar radiation or freezing in eternal shadow. It's like choosing between being burned at the stake or locked in a medieval ice house. Historically, humans have tried to conquer harsh lands with sheer bravado. Think of the Mongols sweeping across the steppes only to get bogged down in Vietnam's jungles. Mercury doesn't care about your bravado. It's a planet that says, oh, you thought you were tough? Hold my solar flare. You're not even halfway through your day, and you're already cooked, frozen, and irradiated. The lack of atmosphere means no sound, so your screams are silent, like a heretic's last words in a 13th century Inquisition. Let's not forget the gravity. About 38% of Earth's. You try to run, but it's like wading through molasses while wearing clown shoes. You'd fall, break something, and lie there, contemplating your life choices like a Roman soldier abandoned in the Teutoburg forest, surrounded by enemies. Except Mercury's enemies are the laws of physics, and they're undefeated. You might wonder about water. There's ice in Mercury's polar craters, shaded from the sun, but getting there is like crossing the Sahara to reach an oasis, only to find it's salted. You'd need a drill, a refinery, and a miracle, none of which you have. Historically, humans have died for less, like the pilgrims starving at Jamestown, eating shoe leather. On Mercury, you don't even have shoes left. They've melted or shattered. As the day drags on, your suit's systems fail. The cooling unit gives up, like a steam engine in the Industrial Revolution, pushed past its limits. You're sweating, then freezing, then sweating again, like a medieval peasant caught in a feudal lord's tax cycle. Your oxygen runs low and you're gasping, vision blurring, like a sailor drowning in the Atlantic during the age of sail. Mercury doesn't care about your dreams of exploration. It's a cosmic death trap and you're just another notch on its belt. So, you've survived a few hours on Mars and Mercury, which is honestly more than most would manage. You're not a hero though. You're a cautionary tale, like those alchemists who poisoned themselves chasing eternal life. The solar system is a graveyard of ambition, and you're just the latest tombstone. Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll dive into the gas giants, where survival gets even more absurd, and your odds of making it through the day are about as good as a snowball's chance in a blast furnace. Alright, you've somehow clung to life through Venus's acid bath and Mars's frozen wasteland, even survived Mercury's cosmic barbecue. But now, we're cranking the dial to 11 because we're heading to the gas giants, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, where survival isn't just a long shot, it's a cosmic joke. These planets are so absurdly hostile, they make the previous ones look like a bad Airbnb rental. Buckle up, because you're about to learn why even your most optimistic Renaissance explorer level bravado won't save you from becoming a footnote in the universe's worst travelogue. First stop, Jupiter, the solar system's overachieving bully, so massive it could swallow Earth like a medieval peasant scarfing down moldy bread during a famine. You're not landing on Jupiter because it's a gas giant with no solid surface, just an endless swirl of hydrogen and helium, spiced with storms that could eat hurricanes for breakfast. Picture yourself as a 17th century sailor on a rickety ship, tossed into the heart of a North Atlantic tempest, except this tempest is the Great Red Spot, a storm twice Earth-sized that's been raging for centuries. You're floating in your spacesuit because there's nowhere to stand and the pressure is already crushing you, like a Spanish inquisitor tightening the screws. The atmosphere is a toxic brew of ammonia and methane, so even if you could breathe, you'd choke faster than a courtier caught slandering a Tudor king. Radiation hits you like a plague of locusts, courtesy of Jupiter's magnetic field, which is 20,000 times stronger than Earth's. Your cells are frying, and your suit's electronics are glitching like a 19th century telegraph during a lightning storm. You think, maybe I'll just float to safety. Nope. The gravity is 2.5 times Earth's, so you're sinking deeper into the atmosphere, where the pressure turns you into a human pancake, like a heretic squashed under stones in a 16th century witch trial. If you somehow survive the radiation and pressure, the temperature swings from freezing at the cloud tops to thousands of degrees deeper down, where hydrogen turns metallic. It's like diving into a blacksmith's forge, except the blacksmith is the universe, and it's not forging you a sword, it's forging your epitaph. Let's say you're a Viking warrior, used to braving icy seas and brutal winters. Jupiter laughs at your fur cloak and battle axe. You're not conquering this, you're not even surviving the first hour. The winds, hitting 400 miles per hour, whip you around like a rag doll in a gladiatorial arena, and there's no crowd to cheer your demise, just an endless, swirling void. Your oxygen's running low, and the communication delay to Earth is about 35 minutes, so your desperate pleas for help are as useful as a medieval monk's prayers during the Black Death. You're gone, reduced to a smear of organic matter in Jupiter's clouds, a cautionary tale for anyone who thought gas giant sounded like a fun road trip. Next up, Saturn, the solar system's Instagram model with its stunning rings. You're thinking, maybe I'll chill on those rings, snap a selfie. Wrong. Those rings are chunks of ice and rock, some as big as houses, moving at 40,000 miles per hour. Step onto one and you're playing cosmic dodgeball with no chance of winning. It's like being a peasant in the 100 Years' War, dodging volleys of arrows, except these arrows are boulders, and there's no castle to hide in. Saturn's atmosphere is another hydrogen-helium nightmare, with the winds up to 1,100 miles per hour, making Jupiter's storms look like a gentle breeze. You're tumbling through clouds of ammonia ice, feeling like a sailor lost in the roaring 40s, except there's no ship, just you and your rapidly failing spacesuit. The temperature at the cloud tops is negative 280 degrees Fahrenheit, so frostbite sets in faster than it did for those poor souls on Shackleton's Antarctic expedition. Your suit's heater is working overtime, burning power like an 18th century candlemaker during a royal ball, but it's not enough. You're freezing, and the radiation from Saturn's magnetic field is cooking your insides like being a heretic roasted on both sides of the stake. You might think, I'll hide in the ring's shadow. Cute, but the rings are razor thin and offer no real protection. Plus, the debris is constantly colliding, turning your hiding spot into a blender. Historically, humans have been cocky about new frontiers. Think of the conquistadors plundering the Americas, only to die of dysentery. Saturn's like that, but instead of the gold, you're chasing survival, and instead of dysentery, it's instant death by pulverization. Your suit rips, and the vacuum sucks the air from your lungs, like being thrown into the void of a 17th century pirate's plank walk, except there's no ocean to drown in, just endless cold and pressure. Let's try Uranus, because why not add insult to injury? This ice giant is tilted on its side, like it got drunk and fell over at a cosmic party. The atmosphere is methane, hydrogen, and helium, with a lovely greenish hue that screams, "You're not welcome." The temperature is a brisk negative 370 degrees Fahrenheit, making your suit's insulation about as useful as a paper shield in a medieval Yoast. Winds hit 560 miles per hour, tossing you around like a leaf in a storm, or a peasant caught in a 14th century riot. The methane gives the air a stench you can't smell through your suit, but you know it's there, mocking you like the reek of a plague-ridden village. Radiation is lower than Jupiter's, but still enough to scramble your DNA like a bad alchemist's potion. You're floating in a sea of gas, no solid ground, just endless clouds of despair. Imagine being a Mongol horseman charging across the steppes only to realize there's no land to conquer, just an abyss. Your suit's systems are failing, and the 19-minute communication delay to Earth means your SOS is as pointless as a carrier pigeon in a hurricane. You're not surviving, you're just delaying the inevitable, like a condemned prisoner in the Tower of London, waiting for the axe. Finally, Neptune, the solar system's moody loner, so far from the sun it's practically in exile. The temperature is negative 330 degrees Fahrenheit, and the winds are the fastest in the solar system, clocking in at 1,500 miles per hour. You're whipped around like a flag in a gale, or a sailor lashed to the mast during a 16th century shipwreck. The atmosphere is another methane hydrogen helium mix, with storms that make hurricanes look like tantrums. You're in a deep freeze, your suit cracking like porcelain in a Victorian factory accident. The pressure is crushing, and the radiation, while not as bad as Jupiter's, is still enough to make you wish you'd stayed home. You think, maybe I'll find a moon to land on. Triton, Neptune's biggest moon, is a tempting target, but it's colder than the planet itself, at negative 391 degrees Fahrenheit, and its surface is a mix of nitrogen ice and geysers spewing. Who knows what? It's like landing on a frozen volcano, as inviting as a 13th century leper colony. Historically, humans have faced impossible odds and failed spectacularly. Think of the lost colony of Roanoke, vanishing without a trace. Neptune's like that, but instead of mysterious disappearance, you're flash frozen and shredded by winds. Your oxygen's gone, your suit's a wreck, and you're alone, 2.7 billion miles from home, with a 4-hour communication delay. Your last thought, as you drift into oblivion, is probably about how you should have listened to that medieval astrologer who warned you about ill-fated journeys. The gas giants are the universe's way of saying, you thought you were tough? Try surviving me. You don't. You're a speck in their storms, a footnote in their history, like a forgotten soldier in Napoleon's retreat from Moscow, except there's no snow, just endless, crushing, freezing chaos. Stay tuned for part 4, where we wrap up this cosmic death tour with the outer reaches, Pluto, the Kuiper Belt, and beyond, where survival is so absurd it's almost comedic, and your chances of making it are about as good as a court jester's odds of becoming king. So, you've been melted, frozen, irradiated, and pulverized by the solar system's worst real estate, from Venus's acid sauna to Neptune's icy windstorm. You're probably thinking, surely it can't get worse. Oh, sweet summer child, welcome to the final leg of our cosmic death tour. The outer reaches, Pluto, the Kuiper Belt, and the hypothetical fringes of the solar system. This is where survival goes from impossible to so absurd it's almost performance art. Picture yourself as a 15th century sailor chasing myths of gold beyond the horizon, only to find scurvy, storms, and a watery grave. Out here, the universe is that ocean, and you're the fool who forgot the lifeboat. Let's start with Pluto, the solar system's disgraced ex-planet, demoted to dwarf planet status like a noble stripped of their title in a medieval court. You step onto its icy surface, feeling like a polar explorer from the Age of Sail, dreaming of glory. Except Pluto's surface is a mix of nitrogen, methane, and carbon monoxide ice, colder than a witch's heart at negative 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Your spacesuit, already a veteran of Venus's acid and Jupiter's radiation, is now brittle, cracking like porcelain in a 19th century factory mishap. One wrong move and you're leaking oxygen faster than a punctured wineskin in a Viking raid. The atmosphere is a pathetic wisp of nitrogen, offering less protection than a parchment shield in a knight's duel. You think, maybe I'll warm up in the sunlight. Cute. Pluto's so far from the sun, 3.7 billion miles, that the sunlight is weaker than a candle in a medieval monastery. You're shivering, your teeth chattering like a telegraph operator, sending an SOS during the Titanic's final hours. The terrain is a nightmare of jagged ice mountains and frozen plains, like trekking across Antarctica during Shackleton's era, but without the hope of rescue. You slip on a methane ice patch and your suit tears, exposing you to a vacuum that sucks the air from your lungs, faster than a 17th century executioner's noose. Even if you avoid falling, the low gravity, about 6% of Earth's, makes every step a clumsy bounce, like a court jester trying to dance for a king's amusement. You're not dancing, you're flailing. Radiation is your next problem. With no magnetic field, Pluto lets cosmic rays pummel you like arrows at Agincourt. Your cells are mutating, and your suit's electronics are fritzing out, like a steam engine breaking down during the Industrial Revolution. You might think, I'll find water. Sure, there's probably water ice buried under the surface, but digging it out without tools is like a peasant trying to mine gold with a spoon during the California gold rush. You're starving, dehydrated, and freezing, and it's only been a couple of hours. The communication delay to Earth is 4.5 hours, so your cries for help are as useful as a medieval monk's letter to a distant pope during a plague. Pluto doesn't care about your dreams of exploration. It's a frozen graveyard, and you're just another ghost. Now, let's venture into the Kuiper Belt, a cosmic junkyard of icy rocks and dwarf planets beyond Pluto. You're floating in your battered suit, surrounded by debris ranging from pebbles to city-sized chunks, all drifting in a cold, dark void. It's like sailing through the Bermuda Triangle in the Age of Sail, except instead of mysterious disappearances, you're dodging high-speed ice bullets. One hit and your suit's done, leaking like a sieve in a 16th century galleon. The temperature out here is close to absolute zero, negative 459 degrees Fahrenheit. So cold your suit's materials turn brittle, like a knight's armor shattering in a joust. There's no atmosphere, no solid ground, just an endless sea of frozen leftovers from the solar system's formation. You're alone, like a castaway on a desert island, except there's no island, no coconuts, just darkness and cold. Historically, humans have faced isolation and perished. Think of the Roanoke colonists, vanishing without a trace. The Kuiper Belt is Roanoke on steroids with no hope of a resupply ship. Your oxygen's running low and the radiation is relentless, cooking you slowly like a heretic on a low flame. You might spot Eris or Almea, other dwarf planets, but they're just as welcoming as Pluto, which is to say, not at all. You're not surviving, you're just a speck in a cosmic snowstorm, waiting for the end. Let's push further to the hypothetical Oort cloud, a theoretical shell of comets so far out it makes Pluto look like your backyard. We're talking 100,000 times Earth's distance from the sun, where the star is just a bright speck, like a distant lighthouse to a shipwrecked sailor. The temperature is so close to absolute zero that your suit's systems fail instantly, like a 19th century steamship's boiler exploding in the cold. There's no ground, no air, just a sparse scattering of icy bodies floating in a vacuum. You're weightless, adrift like a medieval pilgrim lost in the desert, hallucinating salvation. Except here, salvation is a myth, and the only visions are of your own frozen corpse. Radiation from interstellar space batters you, and your suit's power dies, leaving you in darkness, like a candle snuffed out in a Victorian seance. The communication delay to Earth is measured in days, so your SOS is as pointless as a Mayan sacrifice to stop a drought. Historically, humans have chased the unknown and died for it. Think of the Franklin expedition, lost in the Arctic, or the countless explorers swallowed by the sea. The Oort cloud is the ultimate unknown, and it swallows you whole. Let's wrap this up with a reality check. You've tried surviving Venus's acid, Mars's cold, Mercury's heat, Jupiter's storms, Saturn's rings, Uranus's tilt, Neptune's winds, Pluto's ice, and the Kuiper Belt's void. Each one laughed at your survival instincts, like a Roman emperor mocking a gladiator. The solar system isn't a playground, it's a gauntlet of death, designed to remind you that Earth is the only place that tolerates your fragile, oxygen-breathing, temperature-sensitive self. Historically, humans have been cocky, from the Romans marching into barbarian lands to the colonial empires carving up continents, only to be humbled by disease, weather, or rebellion. The universe is the ultimate humbler. You're not Columbus discovering a new world, or Magellan circumnavigating the globe. You're a speck, a brief flicker in a cosmic horror show. Your spacesuit, your grit, your dreams of glory, they're as useless as a 14th century alchemist's potion against the plague. So why wouldn't you survive a day on any planet? Because the universe doesn't care. It's not personal, it's just physics. Venus melts you, Mars freezes you, Mercury roasts you, the gas giants crush you, and the outer reaches turn you into a cosmic icicle. Each planet is a reminder that humanity's survival is a fluke, a lucky break on a tiny blue dot. Next time you're sipping coffee, staring at the stars, dreaming of adventure, remember this: the solar system isn't your friend. It's a medieval executioner with 1,000 blades, and you're out of pardons. Thanks for joining me on this brutal, sarcastic ride through the cosmos. If you're still here, you're tougher than I thought. Mentally, at least. Drop a comment about which planet you'd stupidly try to survive on, and I'll see you next time for more tales of human folly, cosmic or otherwise. Until then, stay safe on Earth, because it's the only place that doesn't want you dead in under an hour. Picture this: you're dropped into the Amazon rainforest at dusk. No gear, no guide, just you and your questionable life choices. Within hours, you're dinner for something with too many legs or too many teeth, because the Amazon doesn't mess around. It's nature's equivalent of a medieval torture chamber. Welcome to a night where survival is less likely than a peasant outrunning the Black Death. This is a sarcastic, brutal dive into why you wouldn't last a single night in the world's most overrated jungle. Buckle up, because the Amazon is about to teach you a lesson in humility, pain, and why you should have stayed home. You step into the rainforest, and it's like walking into a sauna owned by a sadist. The air is so thick with humidity, it feels like you're breathing soup. It's 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and the sun's barely set, but you're already sweating like a 17th century sailor hauling cannons in the Caribbean. Your clothes stick to you, turning into a second skin that's about as comfortable as a hair shirt worn by a medieval monk. The ground is a slick mess of mud and decaying leaves, like the floor of a tavern after a particularly rowdy Viking feast. You take one step and slip, because of course you do. Grace isn't a survival trait here. The Amazon doesn't care about your dignity, it's too busy plotting your demise. Let's talk about the noise. It's not the peaceful chirping of birds you imagined from some nature documentary. It's a cacophony of screeches, howls, and rustles, like a 16th century battlefield where everyone's losing. Monkeys scream overhead, sounding like they're auditioning for a horror movie. Insects buzz so loudly, it's like a swarm of tiny bagpipes played by tone-deaf Scotsmen. You can't see what's making the noise, because the canopy blocks out the moonlight, leaving you in darkness so thick it's like being locked in a medieval dungeon. You fumble for your phone, thinking you'll use the flashlight, but the battery's already dying, and the screen's fogging up from the humidity. Congratulations, you're now as blind as a 14th century alchemist trying to read stars through a storm. You decide to move, because standing still feels like signing your own death warrant. Big mistake. The undergrowth is a tangle of vines and roots, like nature set up a booby trap just for you. You trip because the Amazon is basically a medieval obstacle course designed by a vengeful lord. Thorns snag your skin, drawing blood faster than a barber surgeon with a rusty lancet. Speaking of blood, the mosquitoes descend like a biblical plague. These aren't your backyard skeeters, they're the size of small birds, and they're carrying diseases that make the Black Death look like a head cold. Dengue, malaria, Zika, pick your poison. You swat at them, but it's like fighting a Mongol horde with a twig. Within minutes, you're a walking buffet, itching and swelling like a peasant who angered a witch. You think, maybe I'll find water. Sure, there's water everywhere, puddles, streams, and dewdrops the size of grapes. But it's not the clean, bottled stuff you're used to. It's teeming with parasites that'd make a Victorian sewer look sterile. Drink it, and you're inviting amoebas to throw a rave in your intestines. Think of the 19th century explorers who died of dysentery chasing glory in uncharted lands. You're about to join their club. You decide to avoid the water, but dehydration's already creeping in. because you're sweating buckets and the Amazon doesn't believe in free refills. Your mouth's drier than a desert nomad's diary, and you're starting to hallucinate, like a crusader seeing mirages in the Holy Land. Let's talk about the wildlife, because the Amazon's menagerie makes a Roman gladiator pit look like a petting zoo. You hear a rustle and your heart races thinking it's a jaguar. It's not. It's worse. It's a bullet ant whose sting feels like being shot, hence the name. One bite and you're screaming louder than a heretic at a 15th century witch trial. You stumble away only to step on a pit viper, camouflaged like a ninja in a samurai's nightmare. Its venom hits you like a medieval poisoner's finest work, and you're convulsing before you can say antidote. Even if you dodge the snakes and ants, the spiders are waiting. The Goliath bird eater, a tarantula the size of a dinner plate, doesn't eat birds. It's just too polite to admit it prefers human tears. You see one scuttle by and your survival instincts scream, "Run!" But where? The jungle's a maze and you're no Theseus with a ball of string. You're more like a peasant lost in the Black Forest, except the monsters here are real. You might think, I'll climb a tree for safety. Adorable. The trees are crawling with army ants, which march in swarms that devour everything in their path, like a Viking raid but with better coordination. They'll strip your flesh faster than you can say bad idea. Plus, the branches are home to poison dart frogs, whose skin secretes toxins that'd make a Renaissance assassin jealous. Brush against one, and you're paralyzed, lying on the forest floor like a fallen knight, waiting for something worse to find you. And something worse always finds you. The Amazon's food chain is a pyramid, and you're at the bottom, below the piranhas, which, by the way, are in every stream. You wade through water, thinking it's shallow, and suddenly you're lunch, your legs nibbled to the bone like a 17th century pirate caught by cannibals. You stagger back to dry land, if you can call it that, and realize you're starving. The jungle's full of plants, but good luck figuring out which ones won't kill you. Most are poisonous, like the manchineel tree, whose fruit burns your mouth worse than a medieval torturer's hot iron. You try a random berry, hoping for a snack, and end up vomiting like a sailor with scurvy. Historically, humans have been terrible at surviving jungles without preparation. Think of the conquistadors hacking through South America, dying of fever and starvation while chasing El Dorado. You're no conquistador. You're just a guy who thought a night in the Amazon sounded adventurous. The psychological toll is creeping in now. You're alone, except for the sounds of things that want to eat you. It's like being a medieval peasant during a wolf-infested winter, except the wolves here have scales, fangs, or 8 legs. The darkness amplifies every fear, like being locked in a 13th century castle during a siege, hearing the enemy at the gates. You're jumping at every snap, every rustle, your nerves frayed like a rope in a storm-tossed galleon. You try to rest, but there's no safe spot. The ground's wet, crawling with leeches that latch onto you like tax collectors in feudal Europe. You lean against a tree and it's covered in stinging ants, or worse, a fer-de-lance snake, whose bite turns your blood to jelly. Sleep? Forget it. The Amazon doesn't do naps. It's been a few hours, and you're already a wreck, hungry, thirsty, bitten, stung, and bleeding. The humidity's turning your wounds septic, like a soldier's gashes in a Napoleonic battlefield hospital. You're starting to think the Amazon isn't just a place. It's a sentient entity that hates you personally, like a 16th century witch hunter with a grudge. And it's only midnight. You've got hours to go and the jungle's just warming up. Stay tuned for part 2, where we dive deeper into the Amazon's bag of tricks, from flesh-eating fish to storms that make you wish you died in the first hour. Your odds of surviving are about as good as a heretic's chance at a fair trial. You've made it past midnight in the Amazon rainforest, which is honestly more than most would manage, but don't start patting yourself on the back. You're still a walking buffet for nature's worst nightmares. The jungle's been toying with you like a 16th century executioner letting a prisoner think they might escape before tightening the noose. It's pitch black, the humidity's got you drenched, and every step feels like a gamble in a game rigged by a sadistic Renaissance gambler. The Amazon's not done with you yet. It's just warming up for the main course. Let's talk about the rain, because the Amazon doesn't do subtle. A storm rolls in, sudden and vicious, like a Viking raid on an unsuspecting village. The sky opens up, dumping water like it's trying to drown Noah without the ark. You're soaked in seconds, your clothes heavier than a knight's armor after a muddy joust. The ground turns into a swamp, sucking at your feet like a medieval tax collector draining your last coin. You try to find cover, but the canopy's leaking like a poorly thatched peasant hut during the Great Flood of 1342. The rain's not just water, it's a delivery system for more misery. It stirs up the insects, and suddenly you're swarmed by mosquitoes so aggressive they'd make a Mongol horde look polite. Each bite feels like a dagger, and you're itching worse than a sailor with scurvy scratching at sores. You're starting to think malaria's not a risk, it's a guarantee. You stumble through the mud, desperate for shelter, but the trees are no help. They're home to fire ants whose bites burn like the torches of a 15th century witch hunt. You brush against a branch, and it's like setting off a trap in an Indiana Jones movie, except instead of a boulder, you get a swarm that makes you wish you'd chosen the boulder. Your skin's a road map of welts now, and the pain's so intense you're screaming louder than a heretic confessing under torture. You think, maybe I'll find a cave. Good luck. Any cave in the Amazon is probably a jaguar's den, and those cats don't share. Picture a 17th century pirate stumbling into a lion's lair, except this lion's got stealth and a taste for clumsy intruders. You hear a low growl, and your heart stops, like a peasant hearing the hoofbeats of a warlord's cavalry. You back away, but the jungle's a maze, and every direction looks like a death sentence. The jaguar's not your only worry. The rivers are alive with piranhas, and in the rain, the water's rising, turning dry paths into deadly streams. You wade through what you thought was a puddle, and suddenly you're thigh deep, feeling nibbles that aren't friendly. Piranhas don't care about your dreams of survival. They're the Amazon's equivalent of a 14th century bandit gang, stripping you to the bone before you can scream for mercy. You scramble out, bleeding, but the blood attracts caimans, the Amazon's answer to crocodiles. They glide through the water, eyes glowing like lanterns in a haunted 19th century manner. One snap and you're missing a leg, like a soldier caught in a Napoleonic cannon blast. You're not just fighting the wildlife now, you're fighting your own body. Dehydration's setting in, despite the rain, because you can't drink the water without inviting a parasite party. Your stomach's growling louder than the howler monkeys overhead, who sound like they're mocking your misery. You spot some fruit, maybe a mango, hanging tantalizingly close. You grab it, desperate, only to realize it's not a mango. It's some toxic look-alike that burns your mouth like a medieval poisoner's brew. You spit it out, gagging, your throat raw like a sailor's after months at sea. Historically, explorers in the Amazon didn't fare much better. Think of Francisco de Orellana, the 16th century Spaniard who sailed the Amazon River, losing men to starvation, disease, and arrows from locals who weren't thrilled about uninvited guests. You're no Orellana, you don't even have a boat. You're just a soggy, bleeding mess, stumbling through a jungle that's laughing at your hubris. The rain stops, but the relief is temporary. The humidity spikes, and now you're steaming like a pot in a Victorian kitchen. Your wounds are festering, because the Amazon's air is a petri dish for infection. Think of the Civil War soldiers, their cuts turning gangrenous without modern medicine. You've got no medicine, no bandages, just a fading will to live. You try to rest, leaning against a tree, but it's crawling with termites that bite like they've got a personal vendetta. You jerk away, only to step into a patch of stinging nettles, which feel like a 13th century flagellant's whip. Your body's a canvas of pain now, and it's not even dawn. The psychological toll is crushing. You're alone, surrounded by sounds that could be death in 1,000 forms. It's like being a medieval peasant during a wolf-infested winter, except the wolves here might be anacondas. You've heard the stories, snakes that can swallow you whole, like a dragon from a Viking saga. You freeze at every rustle, imagining a 20-foot serpent coiling around you, squeezing the life out like a 15th century torturer's rack. You try to stay calm, but your mind's unraveling, like a sailor lost at sea, seeing ghosts in the fog. You're hallucinating now, dehydrated and feverish, seeing shapes in the darkness. Maybe it's a jaguar, maybe it's just a vine, but your brain's too fried to tell. You think about fire, because that's what survivors do in movies, right? You rub sticks together like a prehistoric caveman, but everything's wet and your hands are shaking like a 17th century quack doctor performing surgery. Even if you get a spark, the smoke attracts more insects, and now you're coughing, swatting, and cursing like a pirate, marooned on a hostile shore. The Amazon's not impressed by your survival skills. It's seen better from ants. You're starving, and the jungle's teasing you with food you can't eat. Fish swim in the streams, but catching them without a net is like trying to grab a greased pig in a medieval fair. You spot a bird, but it's gone before you can even think about throwing a rock. And let's be honest, your aim's worse than a drunken archer at Agincourt. You're so hungry you consider eating leaves, but the last time someone tried that in the Amazon, they ended up like a 19th century explorer, dead from poison or parasites. Your body's shutting down now, exhaustion creeping in like a thief in a Dickens novel. You collapse, thinking you'll just rest for a minute, but the ground's alive with critters. Centipedes, scorpions, and beetles scuttle over you, like you're a guest at their feast. You're too weak to move, your energy sapped like a serf after a day in the fields. The Amazon's winning, and it's not even trying. You're not an explorer, you're a cautionary tale, like the countless adventurers who vanished in the jungle, their bones picked clean by nature's cleanup crew. Dawn's still hours away, and you're already a wreck, bitten, stung, bleeding, and half mad. The Amazon's not just a place, it's a gauntlet, a test of survival you're failing spectacularly. Historically, humans have been cocky, from the Romans marching into Germania to the colonial powers carving up Africa, only to be humbled by nature or rebellion. The Amazon's the ultimate humbler, a green hell that chews up your dreams and spits out your bones. Stay tuned for part 3, where we crank up the misery with electric eels, flash floods, and locals who aren't exactly rolling out the welcome mat. Your chances of making it to morning are about as good as a gladiator's odds against a lion. You're still alive in the Amazon rainforest, which is frankly a miracle, like a 14th century peasant surviving a siege by sheer dumb luck. It's past 3 a.m., and you're a soggy, bitten, bleeding mess, stumbling through a jungle that's less tropical paradise and more medieval torture chamber with extra bugs. The rain stopped, but the humidity's so thick it's like breathing through a wet blanket in a 17th century plague hospital. You're exhausted, starving, and starting to think the Amazon has a personal vendetta, like a Renaissance prince you accidentally insulted. Spoiler, it's about to get worse because the jungle's got a few more tricks up its sleeve, and they're all designed to make you regret ever leaving your couch. Let's start with the water, because you're so dehydrated your tongue feels like sandpaper in a desert nomad's diary. You find a stream glimmering in the faint moonlight like a siren's promise to a shipwrecked sailor. You're desperate, so you scoop up a handful, ignoring that little voice screaming about parasites. Big mistake. The water's a cocktail of bacteria and amoebas, and within minutes your stomach's staging a revolt worse than the peasants' revolt of 1381. You're doubled over, vomiting like a Victorian drunkard after a bad batch of gin, and now you're even more dehydrated. The Amazon's water isn't a resource, it's a trap, like the poisoned wine served at a Borgia feast. You stagger away from the stream, only to realize it's not just parasites you need to worry about. The water's alive with electric eels which can zap you with 600 volts, enough to knock you out cold, like a knight unhorsed in a joust. You step back, but the bank's slippery, and you're flailing like a jester trying to impress a king. Splash! You're in the water, and an eel's decided you're the perfect target. The shock hits you like a lightning bolt in a 16th century storm, and you're twitching, sinking, praying for mercy the jungle doesn't offer. Somehow you crawl out, soaked and shaking, but the eels aren't the worst of it. The rising waters attracted Candiris, tiny fish with a nasty habit of swimming into places they shouldn't, like your body's orifices. Legend says they follow urine streams, and you're too terrified to pee, but you're also too weak to care. One wrong move, and you're screaming louder than a heretic on the rack, because a fish just made itself at home where no fish should go. Historically, Amazon tribes warned explorers about these horrors, but men like Percy Fawcett, the 20th century adventurer who vanished chasing a lost city, ignored them. You're no Fawcett, you're just a guy who thought jungle adventure sounded cool. Now you're regretting it because the jungle's not done. The ground's still a swamp from the earlier rain, and every step is a gamble. You sink into mud up to your knees like a soldier stuck in the trenches of World War I, except there's no trench to hide in, just more jungle. Leeches latch onto your legs, sucking blood like tax collectors in feudal Europe, and you're too weak to pull them off. Each one's a tiny vampire, and you're starting to look like a medieval martyr, covered in wounds and misery. You try to find higher ground, but the jungle's a labyrinth and you're no Theseus. You're more like a lost pilgrim in the Holy Land, except instead of salvation, you're chasing survival, and it's slipping away. The wildlife's relentless. You hear a splash nearby, and it's not an eel, it's an anaconda, the Amazon's resident nightmare, slithering through the water like a dragon from a Viking saga. These snakes can grow to 30 feet and crush you like a 15th century torturer's vice. You freeze, hoping it doesn't notice you, but your luck's worse than a gambler's at a Renaissance card table. It senses your heat, your fear, and suddenly you're wrestling a monster that makes a gladiator's lion look cuddly. You thrash, but it's coiling, squeezing, and you're gasping like a sailor drowning in the Atlantic. Even if you escape, you're bruised, battered, and running on fumes. Your body's shutting down now, fever setting in from the mosquito bites and festering wounds. You're burning up, like a patient in a 19th century cholera ward. But there's no doctor, no medicine, just the jungle's relentless assault. You try to focus, to channel some survival instinct, like a 17th century pirate marooned on a hostile shore. Pirates at least had cutlasses. You've got nothing but your wits, and they're fraying like a rope in a storm. You spot a clearing, thinking it's a safe spot, but it's a trap. The clearing's a flood zone, and the rain's left it a muddy death pit. You step in, and it's quicksand, pulling you down like the debts of a medieval merchant. You claw at vines, but they snap, brittle as your hopes. You're sinking, panicking, your heart pounding like a war drum in a Mongol charge. If you escape, it's only because the jungle's toying with you, like a cat with a mouse or a 16th century inquisitor with a confession. The psychological toll is brutal. You're hallucinating now, seeing faces in the trees. Maybe it's the ghosts of explorers who died here, like the countless conquistadors who never returned from their gold hunts. The howler monkeys are screaming again, sounding like demons in a medieval woodcut, and your mind's cracking like a ship's hull in a gale. You're alone, but not really. Every rustle, every shadow is a threat. It's like being a peasant during the 100 Years' War, hearing the enemy's footsteps in the dark. You try to climb a tree, thinking height equals safety, but the branches are slick, and you're no monkey. You slip, crashing down like a drunken knight at a tournament, and now you've sprained something, maybe broken it. The pain's excruciating, like being flogged in a 13th century village square. You're immobile now, a sitting duck for the jungle's predators. A jaguar's stalking you, its eyes glowing like lanterns in a haunted manor. You can't run, can't fight, just pray it gets bored. But the Amazon's predators don't do boredom. You're food, plain and simple, like a serf caught by wolves in a harsh winter. Even if the jaguar passes, the insects don't. Ants crawl over you, biting, stinging, like a swarm of tiny torturers. You're too weak to swat them, too tired to care. Your stomach's a knot, hunger gnawing like a 14th century famine victim's. You spot a frog, bright and colorful, and think, maybe I can eat it. Nope. It's another poison dart frog, its skin laced with toxins that'd make a Renaissance assassin blush. Touch it, and you're paralyzed, lying helpless as the jungle claims you, like a fallen soldier on a Napoleonic battlefield. Dawn's still a couple of hours away, and you're a wreck. Feverish, bleeding, poisoned, and half dead. The Amazon's not just a jungle. It's a machine, grinding down your will like a millstone crushing grain in a medieval village. Historically, humans have faced nature's wrath and lost. Think of the Donner Party eating their own to survive, or the explorers who vanished in the Amazon, their stories swallowed by the green. You're no different, just another fool who thought you could outsmart the jungle. Stay tuned for part 4. Where we wrap up this nightmare with flash floods, hostile locals, and a final reminder that the Amazon doesn't care about your survival story. Your odds of seeing sunrise are about as good as a heretic's chance at a papal pardon. You're still clinging to life in the Amazon rainforest, which is honestly more stubbornness than sense, like a 15th century peasant refusing to flee a burning village. It's the final hours before dawn, and you're a walking disaster, feverish, bleeding, poisoned, and half mad from the jungle's relentless assault. Your body's a roadmap of pain, like a medieval martyr's after a session with the Inquisition. The Amazon's not impressed by your resilience, it's just biding its time, like a 16th century executioner sharpening the axe. You're praying for sunrise, but the jungle's got a few more ways to remind you why you won't make it. Let's start with the flash flood, because the Amazon loves a grand finale. The earlier rains swollen the rivers, and now a wall of water comes roaring through, like the biblical deluge that drowned everything but Noah's pets. You're staggering through the mud, too weak to run when the flood hits, sweeping you off your feet like a Viking longship caught in a North Sea storm. You're tumbling, choking, as the water drags you through vines and roots, each one slashing your skin like a whip in a 13th century punishment square. You grab a branch thinking it's salvation, but it snaps, brittle as your hopes, and you're back in the current, a human piñata for the jungle's wrath. If you survive the flood, you're soaked, shivering, and stuck in a swamp, like a soldier bogged down in the mud of Agincourt. The water's not just wet, it's a breeding ground for more horrors. Leeches cling to you, fatter than a feudal lord's purse, sucking what little blood you've got left. You're too exhausted to pull them off, and each one's a tiny torture device, like the thumbscrews of a Spanish inquisitor. You crawl to what you think is solid ground, but it's another trap. Quicksand pulling you down like the debts of a 17th century merchant. You thrash, sinking deeper, your strength fading faster than a candle in a Victorian seance. You're not just fighting nature now, you're fighting the locals. The Amazon's indigenous tribes aren't exactly rolling out the welcome mat, and who can blame them? You're an intruder, stumbling into their territory like a clumsy conquistador in the 1500s, expecting gold and getting arrows. You hear a rustle, different from the usual jungle chaos, and it's not a jaguar. It's a human shadow, silent and deadly, like a samurai in feudal Japan. You try to signal peace, but your feverish babbling sounds like a drunken sailor's rant, and the locals aren't in the mood for diplomacy. A dart hits you, tipped with curare, a poison that paralyzes you faster than a medieval poisoner's brew. You collapse, unable to move, like a heretic awaiting the stake, and the jungle's silence feels like a death sentence. Even if you dodge the darts, the wildlife still got your number. You're limping now, your sprained ankle throbbing like a wound from a Napoleonic bayonet. A caiman's lurking nearby, its eyes glinting like the lanterns of a 19th century highwayman. You're too slow to run, and it lunges, jaws snapping like a guillotine in the French Revolution. You dodge by sheer luck, but the effort leaves you gasping, your lungs burning like a blacksmith's forge. The air's so thick with humidity, each breath feels like sucking mud through a straw, and you're dizzy, like a sailor lost in the doldrums. Hunger's eating you alive now, worse than the Great Famine of 1315, when peasants chewed tree bark to survive. You spot a fish in a shallow pool, and you lunge, thinking you're finally getting a meal. It's a piranha, and it bites back, taking a chunk of your hand like a 17th century pirate's cutlass. You scream, blood mixing with the water, attracting more of the little monsters, and now you're flailing, one hand useless, like a gladiator facing a pack of lions with a broken sword. You stagger away, but the jungle's got no safe corners. You lean against a tree, desperate for a moment's rest, only to feel a sting, another bullet ant, its bite like a red-hot poker from a medieval torturer. You're screaming again, but your voice is hoarse, barely audible over the howler monkeys, who sound like they're laughing at your misery, like a crowd at a Roman execution. Your fever's spiking, and you're hallucinating worse than a 14th century mystic seeing visions of the apocalypse. The trees seem to move, their branches clawing at you like the demons in a medieval woodcut. You're not sure what's real anymore. Maybe that shadow's an anaconda, maybe it's just a vine, but your mind's too broken to care. You're alone, or so you think, until you hear footsteps, not human, but something big. It's a tapir, harmless in theory, but in your weakened state, it's like facing a charging warhorse in a knight's tournament. It barrels past, knocking you into a thorn bush, and now you're bleeding again, your skin shredded like a heretic's back after a flogging. The psychological toll is unbearable. You're not just fighting the jungle, you're fighting despair, the kind that crushed sailors during the age of sail, lost in endless oceans. You're muttering to yourself, like a mad monk in a 13th century cloister, begging for dawn, but the sky's still black, the stars hidden by the canopy, like hope obscured by a plague-ridden city's smoke. You try to start a fire one last time, because that's what survivors do, right? But the wood's wet, your hands are shaking, and the spark dies faster than a peasant's dreams under a feudal lord's taxes. The smoke only draws more mosquitoes, and now you're coughing, swatting and cursing like a pirate facing the gallows. Your body's giving up. The fever's turned your brain to mush. Your wounds are septic, and you're so weak you can barely stand, like a soldier after a month in a Civil War prison camp. You collapse, the ground cold and wet, crawling with scorpions that sting like they're avenging a personal grudge. You're too tired to move, too broken to fight. The jungle's won, and it's not even dawn yet. Historically, the Amazon swallowed countless souls, explorers, adventurers, dreamers, who thought they could conquer it, like the Romans thought they could tame Germania. They were wrong, and so are you. The jungle's a green machine, grinding down your will like a millstone crushing grain. You're not a hero, you're a footnote, like the lost expeditions of the 19th century, their names forgotten, their bones scattered. The Amazon doesn't care about your story. It's got its own, and you're just a cameo. As the first light of dawn creeps through the canopy, you're barely conscious, a wreck of a human, like a shipwrecked sailor washed ashore, only there's no shore, just more jungle. The birds start singing, but it's not a cheerful morning chorus. It's a mocking requiem, like the bells tolling for a medieval funeral. You've survived the night, technically, but at what cost? You're poisoned, paralyzed, or half-eaten, your body a ruin, your mind shattered like a stained glass window in a sacked cathedral. The Amazons taught you a lesson. It's not a place for humans, not without gear, knowledge, and a whole lot of luck. You had none of those, and now you're a cautionary tale. Like the countless who came before, from conquistadors to gold-hungry fools. Thanks for joining this brutal, sarcastic trek through the Amazon's green hell. If you're still watching, you're tougher than I thought, at least mentally. Drop a comment about what you'd stupidly try to survive in the jungle, and let's see who's brave enough to face this nightmare again. Until next time, stay safe, stay home, because the Amazon's not your friend. It's a medieval executioner, and you're fresh out of pardons. Picture this. You're born into an ancient Egyptian family, thinking you've hit the jackpot with pyramids, pharaohs, and all that Nile River glory. Wrong. Your own kin could be your worst enemy, plotting your demise over a bad batch of barley beer or a misstep in the family pecking order. Welcome to a world where family drama isn't just a holiday argument, it's a deadly game of snakes, poison, and divine curses. This is a sarcastic, brutal dive into why ancient Egyptian families could be more dangerous than a crocodile-infested river. Buckle up, because love and loyalty in the land of the pharaohs often came with a side of betrayal and a tombstone. You wake up in a mud brick house, the sun blazing through the reed mat that passes for a window. It's 1500 BCE, and you're not a pharaoh or a priest, just a regular Egyptian, maybe a farmer or a scribe's kid stuck in a family that makes Game of Thrones look like a friendly picnic. The air smells of dust and sweat, and your breakfast is a chunk of bread so hard it could double as a weapon in a chariot race. Your family's crowded into this cramped house, everyone from your overbearing mother to your scheming uncle, all sharing space like a pack of hyenas fighting over a carcass. First up, let's talk about sibling rivalry, because in ancient Egypt it wasn't just about who got the bigger piece of flatbread. Siblings could be your ticket to an early grave, especially if you're in a family with even a whiff of status. Say you're the eldest son, destined to inherit dad's plot of land or a spot in the temple bureaucracy. Your younger brother's not thrilled about being stuck with nothing but a lifetime of mucking out stables or hauling Nile mud for bricks. He's got that glint in his eye, like a 14th century European noble plotting against his king. You catch him whispering to your cousin, who's got a shady side hustle brewing potions that aren't exactly for healing. Poison was the weapon of choice in ancient Egypt, as common as papyrus scrolls and twice as sneaky. They didn't have CSI, Memphis, so a dash of hemlock in your beer could send you to the afterlife before you noticed the aftertaste. Think of it like a Renaissance court, where a sip of wine could mean curtains. Except here it's your own brother slipping something into your cup, because you got dad's best amulet. You try to stay vigilant, but you're also dodging your sister, who's got her own agenda. Women in ancient Egypt could own property, serve as priestesses, or even run businesses, so your sister's not just sitting around weaving linen. She's eyeing your inheritance too, and she's got a tongue sharper than a flint knife. She's spreading rumors that you're disrespecting the gods, which is a big no-no in a society where offending Amun-Ra could get you shunned faster than a medieval heretic. One wrong word, and the whole village thinks you're cursed, your crops fail, and suddenly you're an outcast, like a leper in a 13th century town. Family gatherings aren't cozy dinners, they're a minefield. Your parents are obsessed with keeping the family name shiny, because in ancient Egypt your reputation was everything. Mess it up and you're not just embarrassing mom, you're risking the whole clan standing with the gods. Your dad's a stickler for tradition, demanding you make offerings to the ancestors at the household shrine. You forget one day because you're exhausted from hauling water in the blazing sun, and suddenly dad's accusing you of inviting divine wrath, like a Puritan father spotting a witch in Salem. He's not wrong to worry. Egyptians believed the gods could smite you for slacking on rituals, and a bad harvest or a sick cow could be blamed on your laziness. Your mom's no better. She's got eyes like a falcon, watching your every move, ready to guilt trip you into marrying some cousin you barely know because it'll strengthen family ties. Marriage in ancient Egypt was often a family affair, and not the fun kind. Refuse, and you're not just breaking her heart, you're risking exile or worse, because family alliances were as serious as a pharaoh's decree. Think of arranged marriages in medieval Europe, except here, saying no might get you disowned or accidentally pushed into a Nile full of crocs. Speaking of the Nile, let's talk about the environment, because your family's survival depends on it, and they'll throw you under the chariot if it means saving themselves. The Nile floods every year, which is great for crops, but also a roulette wheel of disaster. Too much water, and your house is swept away like a poorly built Viking longship. Too little, and your fields dry up, and your family's staring at starvation like peasants during the Great Famine of 1315. If you're the scapegoat for a bad flood season, maybe you didn't pray hard enough or you offended the local priest. Your family might decide you're expendable. They won't kill you outright, usually, but they'll shun you, leaving you to fend for yourself in a society where being alone was as good as a death sentence. You're out there, trying to scrape by, dodging bandits and hoping the gods take pity, like a medieval serf cast out during a plague. Then there's the inheritance game, which makes modern family feuds look like a polite tea party. In ancient Egypt, land and wealth were passed down, but it wasn't a free-for-all. Primogeniture wasn't always the rule, so everyone's scheming to get the best cut. Your uncle, who's got a face like a vulture and a heart to match, is angling for your dad's land, claiming he's more devoted to the gods. He's got the local scribe on his side, forging documents on papyrus that conveniently rewrite the family will. Forgery wasn't uncommon, and with no DNA tests or notarized deeds, it's your word against his. Lose, and you're out of the family, scraping by as a laborer, like a 17th century peasant kicked off the Lord's land. Win, and you've made an enemy for life, because grudges in ancient Egypt lasted longer than a pharaoh's tomb. Let's not forget the supernatural, because the Egyptians were obsessed with the afterlife, and your family could use it against you. They believed in curses, magic, and vengeful spirits, and if you crossed the wrong relative, you might wake up to find a wax figurine of you buried in the backyard, hexed to bring you bad luck. It's like a 15th century witch trial, except instead of a neighbor accusing you, it's your own aunt, who's mad you didn't share your barley harvest. She's muttering spells, and suddenly everyone's blaming you for the locusts eating the crops. You try to fight back, but the local priest is nodding along, because he's got a side deal with your aunt for extra offerings. You're not just fighting family, you're fighting a whole belief system that says the gods are on their side. The physical dangers are no joke either. Your family's house is a breeding ground for disease, with everyone packed in like sardines in a 19th century tenement. No sanitation, just a hole in the ground for a toilet, and the Nile's water is as clean as a medieval sewer. You're dodging dysentery, which could kill you faster than a chariot in a Thebes street race. Your mom's brewing herbal remedies, but they're about as effective as a medieval leech treatment, and if you get sick, your family might decide you're a liability. They'll isolate you, not out of kindness, but to save themselves, like a village shunning a plague victim. You're left to rot, praying to Osiris for a miracle that's not coming. It's been a few hours since you woke up, and you're already dodging poison, curses, and family politics sharper than a flint blade. Your siblings are plotting, your parents are judging, and the gods are watching, ready to smite you for sneezing at the wrong statue. Ancient Egyptian families weren't just dysfunctional, they were deadly. A soap opera where the stakes were your life, and the script was written in hieroglyphs of betrayal. Stay tuned for part 2, where we dive deeper into the chaos of royal families, jealous priests, and the kind of backstabbing that makes a Roman Senate look like a knitting club. Your odds of surviving this family are about as good as a gladiator's against a lion. You've survived the first few hours in your ancient Egyptian family, which is honestly more than most could handle, like dodging arrows in a chariot chase while everyone's betting on your crash. It's still 1500 BCE, and you're neck deep in a household where love is as conditional as a pharaoh's favor, and betrayal is served with breakfast. Your siblings are plotting, your uncle's forging papyrus wills, and the gods are watching, ready to smite you for forgetting to light the incense. The Nile's glittering outside, but don't be fooled. This family's a snake pit, and you're the mouse. Welcome to part 2, where the drama escalates, and your chances of surviving this domestic nightmare drop faster than a peasant's hopes during a bad harvest. Let's dive into the royal families, because if you thought your farmer or scribe clan was bad, the elite households were a soap opera scripted by a vengeful Anubis. Imagine you're not just a regular Joe, but a minor noble, maybe a distant cousin of the pharaoh's third wife. Sounds glamorous, right? Wrong. Royal families in ancient Egypt were like a lion's den with extra intrigue. Take the 18th dynasty. Think Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their brood. You're a lesser sibling or cousin, stuck in the shadow of the royal court in Amarna, where everyone's got a dagger hidden under their kilt. Your older brother's cozying up to the priests of Amun, whispering about how you're not pious enough, which is a death sentence in a society where religion's the glue holding everything together. One false move, and you're accused of heresy, like Akhenaten himself when he tried to ditch the old gods for his sun disk obsession. Heresy's not just a bad look. It's a one-way ticket to exile or a mysterious accident by the Nile, where crocodiles don't ask questions. Your sisters know better. She's got her eye on a marriage to some high-ranking official, because in ancient Egypt, women in elite families were chess pieces in a game of power. She's charming the court, batting her coal-lined eyes, but she's also spreading rumors that you're plotting against the pharaoh. It's like a 16th century European court, where a whispered lie could get you beheaded, except here it's your own sister, framing you for treason to secure her spot in the palace. You try to defend yourself, but the court's a viper's nest and the pharaoh's advisors are as trustworthy as a medieval alchemist promising gold. One wrong word, and you're banished to the desert, like a heretic cast out during the Inquisition, left to bake under Ra's unforgiving sun. Let's talk about the priests, because they're not just spiritual advisors, they're the family's enforcers, like a 15th century bishop with a knack for blackmail. Your uncle's got a buddy in the Temple of Amun, and they're scheming to cut you out of the family fortune. Priests held massive power in ancient Egypt, controlling land, wealth, and the gods' favor. If you're not coughing up offerings, grain, linen, or your best goat, you're on their bad side. Your uncle slips the priest a few deben of copper, and suddenly you're accused of stealing from the temple, a crime worse than spitting on a pharaoh's statue. The punishment? Public humiliation, or worse, a ritual curse that marks you as cursed in the eyes of the gods. It's like being branded a witch in Salem, except the whole village believes you've angered Osiris, and your crops start failing because nobody will trade with you. You try to fight back, but your family's already turned, like a pack of wolves smelling blood. Your dad, who's supposed to be your rock, is too busy kissing up to the local governor to notice you're being framed. He's obsessed with keeping the family's status, because in ancient Egypt, social climbing was a blood sport. One misstep and the whole clan could lose their land, their titles, or their lives. Dad's not risking that for you, especially if he thinks you're bringing bad juju. He's got that tough love vibe, like a Spartan father tossing a weak kid into the wild. Except here, it's less about honor and more about saving face. You're starting to feel like a gladiator in a Roman arena, except your opponents are your own kin, and the crowd's cheering for your downfall. Then there's the marriage trap, because nothing says family love like being strong-armed into a union you didn't sign up for. Your mom's got her heart set on you marrying your cousin, because keeping wealth in the family was the Egyptian way. It's like a medieval arranged marriage, but with higher stakes and worse dental hygiene. Refuse, and you're not just breaking tradition, you're insulting the family's honor, which could get you disowned or accidentally sent on a dangerous job, like guarding a tomb in the Valley of the Kings where bandits lurk. Bandits were a real problem, by the way. Think of them as the highwaymen of the ancient world, ready to slit your throat for a sack of barley. Your cousin, the one you're supposed to marry, isn't thrilled either. She's got her own plans, maybe a secret lover who's a charioteer with a bad reputation. She's slipping you dirty looks, and you're pretty sure she's got a vial of something nasty hidden in her jewelry box. Poison was so common in Egyptian families that it was practically a condiment. A drop of aconite in your lentil stew and you're off to meet Anubis, no questions asked. It's like dining with the Borgias, except the table's set with flatbread and the poisons brewed from desert plants. The supernatural's still a threat, because Egyptians took their magic seriously. Your aunt's got a grudge, maybe because you didn't help with her barley harvest, and now she's paying a local sorcerer to curse you. These weren't just spooky stories. Egyptians believed spells could make you sick, ruin your crops, or send a vengeful spirit to haunt you. Imagine waking up to find a clay figurine with your name scratched on it, buried under your bed. It's like a 17th century witch's hex, except your whole family believes it's real, and they're shunning you faster than a medieval leper. You try to counter the curse, but the only guy who can help is a shady priest who demands half your grain for a cleansing ritual. You're broke, so you're stuck, praying to Thoth for a miracle while your family whispers about your tainted soul. The physical dangers are piling up too. Your family's mud brick house is a death trap, with no ventilation and a floor that's basically a petri dish for disease. You're dodging schistosomiasis, a parasite from the Nile that makes your insides feel like a 19th century cholera outbreak. Your mom's herbal remedies are about as useful as a medieval barber's bloodletting, and if you get sick, your family might decide you're cursed and kick you out. Being cast out in ancient Egypt was like being sent to the wilderness in biblical times. No one's coming to save you, and the desert's as forgiving as a pharaoh's tax collector. You're scavenging for food now, because your family's cut you off, and the Nile's fish are as clean as a medieval sewer. You're starving, like a peasant during the Great Famine, and every bite's a gamble between hunger and dysentery. The psychological toll's brutal. You're paranoid, jumping at every shadow, like a 16th century courtier expecting a dagger in the back. Your family's whispers feel like a conspiracy, and they probably are. You're not just fighting for survival. You're fighting to keep your sanity in a world where your own blood's ready to sell you out for a better plot of land or a nod from the gods. It's been a day, and you're already a wreck, dodging poison, curses, and family politics sharper than a bronze blade. Ancient Egyptian families weren't just dysfunctional, they were a battlefield, where loyalty was a myth and betrayal was the currency. Stay tuned for part 3, where we crank up the chaos with tomb-robbing relatives, divine smiting, and the kind of family feuds that make a Viking blood feud look like a tea party. Your odds of making it through this family are about as good as a chariot driver's in a sandstorm. You're still alive in your ancient Egyptian family, which is frankly a miracle, like surviving a chariot crash in a Thebes street race while everyone bets on your demise. It's still 1500 BCE, and you're drowning in a household where trust is as rare as a cool breeze in the desert and betrayal's as common as Nile silt. Your siblings are scheming, your uncle's bribing priest, and your cousins eyeing you like you're a sacrificial goat. The gods are watching, ready to zap you for a missed offering, and the air's thick with the stench of intrigue and sweat. Welcome to part 3, where the family drama hits pharaoh-level chaos, and your chances of surviving this domestic snake pit plummet faster than a peasant's crops in a locust swarm. Let's talk about tomb-robbing relatives, because nothing says family love like looting your ancestors' graves for a quick payday. In ancient Egypt, tombs were sacred, stuffed with goods for the afterlife. Gold, jewelry, even jars of honey for the god's sweet tooth. Your family's got a plot in the local necropolis, not as fancy as the Valley of the Kings, but still worth a thief's attention. Your cousin, the one with the shifty eyes and a side hustle sharper than a flint knife, has a plan. He's teamed up with some low-life tomb robbers, the kind who'd make a 17th century pirate blush. They're sneaking into great-grandpa's tomb, prying open his sarcophagus like it's a treasure chest in a Viking raid. You catch wind of it because cousin's not exactly subtle, bragging over too much barley beer. You're faced with a choice: snitch and risk the family's wrath, or join in and pray Anubis doesn't curse you to eternal torment. Snitching's no picnic. Tomb robbing was a capital crime, and if the authorities catch your cousin, the whole family's reputation goes down like a poorly built pyramid. You'd be shunned like a medieval heretic, your fields boycotted, your name muddier than the Nile in flood season. But joining in's worse. Tomb robbing was dangerous work. Booby traps, collapsing tunnels, and guards who'd skewer you faster than a Spartan at Thermopylae. Plus, the gods were watching. Egyptians believed desecrating a tomb could bring divine smiting, like lightning from Zeus in a Greek epic. Your cousin doesn't care. He's got debts to pay, maybe to a shady priest or a chariot bookmaker. You tag along, hoping for a cut, but the tomb's dark, damp, and smells like a 19th century plague ward. You're crawling through a tunnel, heart pounding like a war drum in a Persian battle, when a stone shifts. Crunch. You're trapped, your leg crushed, screaming louder than a heretic at a 15th century stake. Your cousin bolts, leaving you to rot, because family loyalty in ancient Egypt was about as solid as a papyrus boat in a storm. Even if you escape the tomb, the supernatural's waiting to ruin your day. Egyptians were obsessed with the afterlife, and your family's not above weaponizing it. Your aunt, still sore about that barley harvest you didn't help with, has upped her game. She's not just cursing you with wax figurines. She's got a priest chanting spells to summon your dead grandpa's spirit. Egyptians believed angry ancestors could haunt you, bringing bad luck like a 14th century witch's hex. Suddenly, your crops are failing, your cow's sick, and everyone's whispering you've pissed off the dead. It's like being accused of witchcraft in Salem, except the whole village believes the gods are on your aunt's side. You try to appease Grandpa with extra offerings at the family shrine, but the priest demands half your grain, and you're already scraping by like a peasant during the Great Famine. You're broke, cursed, and paranoid, jumping at every shadow like a 16th century courtier expecting a dagger. Let's not forget the divine smiting, because the gods were the ultimate family enforcers. Say you accidentally knock over a statue of Bastet during a family argument. Maybe you were dodging your brother's poisoned beer. That's not just clumsy, it's blasphemy, and your family's ready to throw you to the priests like a sacrificial lamb in a biblical tale. The Temple of Amun's got a zero-tolerance policy for disrespect, and you're hauled before a priest who looks like he'd enjoy feeding you to the crocodiles. Blasphemy could mean public flogging, exile, or worse, a ritual execution where you're offered to appease the gods like a Carthaginian child sacrifice but with more paperwork. Your family's not defending you. They're nodding along because saving their own skins is priority one. Think of a Puritan family disowning a sinner in colonial America. Except here, the stakes are eternal. Your mom's crying, but she's also packing your stuff because a cursed kid's bad for business. The family feuds are escalating now, and it's not just about land or gold, it's personal. Your sister's still spreading rumors, but she's gone pro, claiming you're consorting with Set, the god of chaos, which is like being called a devil worshipper in medieval Europe. The village is buzzing, and your dad's getting pressure to disown you before the gods smite the whole clan. He's torn, but not enough to risk his status. He's got a meeting with the local governor, and a cursed kid doesn't look good on his resume. You try to clear your name, but the evidence is stacked against you. Your uncle's forged a papyrus letter, proving you sold temple offerings on the black market, and the scribe who wrote it owes him a favor. It's like a 17th century courtroom, where a forged deed could cost you your land, or your life. You're dragged before the village elders, who aren't exactly impartial, because your uncle's been bribing them with extra fish. The verdict's exile, and you're cast out like a biblical scapegoat, left to wander the desert with nothing but your sandals and a prayer to Ra that doesn't get answered. The physical dangers are relentless. Your family's house is still a disease factory, and now you're dodging tuberculosis, which spreads faster than gossip in a Roman forum. Your mom's remedies, garlic and beer, are about as effective as a medieval leech cure, and you're coughing up blood like a 19th century consumptive. Your family's not nursing you, they're isolating you because sickness was seen as a divine punishment, like a plague in a 13th century village. You're left in a corner of the house, feverish and weak, praying to Sekhmet for healing, while your siblings argue over who gets your bed when you croak. If you're not sick, you're still not safe. The Nile's full of dangers, and your family's got you hauling water, because kids were cheap labor in ancient Egypt. You're wading through reeds, dodging crocodiles that'd make a Viking berserker flinch. One snap, and you're lunch, like a gladiator tossed to the beasts in a Roman arena. Your dad's not worried. He's got 3 more kids, and replacements are cheap. It's like a Spartan family valuing strength over sentiment, except here, weakness means you're crocodile chow. The psychological toll's crushing. You're not just paranoid. You're broken, like a sailor lost at sea in the age of sail, seeing ghosts in the fog. Every creak in the house is a plot, every glance a threat. Your family's whispers feel like a conspiracy, and they probably are. You're dreaming of escape, but where? The desert's a death sentence, the Nile's a trap, and the cities are full of thieves who'd gut you for a loaf of bread. You're trapped, like a medieval serf tied to the land, except your lord is your family, and they're as merciful as a pharaoh's tax collector. It's been a day, and you're a wreck, dodging curses, poison, and divine wrath while your kin sharpen their knives. Ancient Egyptian families weren't just a drama. They were a gauntlet, where every step was a test and failure meant a one-way trip to the afterlife. Stay tuned for part 4, where we wrap up this nightmare with royal assassinations, family vendettas, and a final reminder that your blood's more dangerous than a cobra's bite. Your odds of surviving this clan are about as good as a rower's in a Nile storm. You're still breathing in your ancient Egyptian family, which is honestly more stubbornness than skill, like a gladiator limping through a Roman arena while the crowd bays for blood. It's 1500 BCE, and you're a battered survivor in a household where love is a myth and betrayal's as routine as sunrise over the Nile. Your siblings are plotting your downfall, your uncle's forging papyrus to steal your inheritance, and your aunt's cursing you with spells that'd make a 15th century witch jealous. The gods are watching, ready to smite you for a crooked glance, and your family's sharper than a cobra's fangs. Welcome to part 4, the the grand finale of this domestic nightmare, where the stakes hit pharaoh-level insanity, and your odds of surviving this clan crash harder than a chariot in a sandstorm. Let's start with royal assassinations, because if you thought your scribe or farmer family was deadly, the pharaoh's kin were a bloodbath with better jewelry. Imagine you're a minor royal, maybe a nephew of Ramses II, living in the glittering palace at Pi-Ramesses. Sounds like a dream, right? Wrong. The royal court's a viper's nest, where everyone's got a dagger under their kilt and a grudge sharper than a bronze blade. Your cousin, a prince with a smile like a crocodile's, is eyeing the throne, and you're in his way. Maybe you're too popular with the priests or too close to the pharaoh's favorite wife. He's slipping poison into your wine, brewed from desert plants that'd make a Renaissance poisoner blush. Poison was so common in royal families that it was practically a family recipe, passed down like grandma's flatbread. You dodge the wine, but now he's got the palace guards whispering you're plotting a coup. It's like a 16th century Tudor court, where a rumor could get you beheaded, except here it's your own cousin framing you for treason to secure his crown. The pharaoh's not amused. He's got bigger problems, like Hittite armies and a new pyramid to build. So he exiles you to the Nubian mines, where you'll bake under Ra's son like a heretic in a Spanish auto-da-fe. Family vendettas are next, because in ancient Egypt grudges lasted longer than a mummy's curse. Your uncle's still sore about that land dispute, and he's not just forging wills anymore. He's gone full vendetta, like a Viking chieftain swearing a blood feud. He's rallied your cousins who've got axes to grind and debts to settle, and they're coming for you. They're not subtle. Think of a 14th century Italian family brawl, but with more sand and fewer swords. You're ambushed on your way to the fields, dodging spears like a gladiator in a Roman circus. You escape, barely, but now you're marked, and the village is buzzing with your uncle's lies. He's claiming you've angered Set, the god of chaos, which is like being called a devil worshipper in medieval Europe. The locals won't trade with you, your crops are shunned, and your family's nodding along, because a vendetta's easier than admitting they're wrong. You're a pariah, like a 13th century leper, scraping by while your kin plot your next accident. The supernatural's still a threat, and your family's milking it like a cow in a famine. Your sister's up at her game, hiring a sorcerer to craft a spell that'll make your life a living hell. Egyptians believed magic could summon spirits or curse your soul, and your sister's got a wax figurine of you, stabbed with pins and buried in the desert. It's like a 17th century witch's hex, except the whole village believes it's real, and your crops are dying faster than a peasant's hopes under a bad pharaoh. You try to counter the curse, but the priest demands your last sack of grain, and you're already starving like a serf in the Great Famine. You're feverish, paranoid, seeing shadows in the moonlight like a sailor lost in the age of sail, haunted by ghosts. Your family's whispers feel like a conspiracy, and they are. Your sister's now claiming you've defiled the family shrine, a crime that could get you flogged or worse, offered to the gods like a sacrificial lamb in a biblical tale. The physical dangers are relentless. Your family's mud brick house is a death trap, collapsing under the weight of too many grudges and too little maintenance. A wall crumbles, nearly crushing you like a poorly built pyramid in a storm. You're dodging malaria now, spread by mosquitoes that thrive in the Nile's stagnant pools. Your mom's remedies, onion poultices, and prayers are about as useful as a medieval barber's leech cure, and you're burning up like a 19th century cholera patient. Your family's not helping. They're isolating you because sickness was a divine curse, like a plague in a 13th century village. You're left in the courtyard, shivering under a reed mat, while your siblings argue over who gets your sandals when you die. If you're not sick, you're still not safe. Your family's got you working the fields because labor was cheap and kids were expendable. You're hauling Nile mud under a sun hotter than a blacksmith's forge, dodging scorpions that sting like a 15th century torturer's whip. One bite and you're convulsing, praying to Sekhmet while your dad shrugs because he's got backups. It's like a Spartan family tossing weaklings into the wild, except here, weakness means you're scorpion bait. The Nile's no refuge. Your uncles accidentally sent you to fetch water from a crocodile-infested stretch, hoping nature does his dirty work. One snap and your lunch, like a gladiator tossed to the beasts in a Roman arena. The psychological toll's unbearable. You're not just fighting your family, you're fighting despair, the kind that crushed medieval serfs under a lord's taxes. You're hallucinating now, feverish and starved, seeing Anubis in every shadow like a 14th century mystic dreading the apocalypse. Your family's turned on you, like a pack of wolves smelling blood, and you're alone, trapped in a world where your kin are deadlier than the desert. You dream of escape, but the cities are full of thieves, the desert's a furnace, and the Nile's a graveyard. You're a prisoner, like a 17th century debtor in a London jail, except your debt's to your family, and they're collecting in blood. The final blow comes at a family feast, because nothing says ancient Egypt like a celebration turned execution. Your mom's planned a big offering to Amun, hoping to cleanse the family's bad luck, aka you. The table's set with bread, beer, and fish, but you're not eating. Your brother slipped hemlock into your cup, and your sister's smiling like a cat with a mouse. You dodge the drink, but the feast turns ugly when your uncle accuses you of stealing from the temple. A lie backed by his priest buddy. The village elders are there, and they're not on your side. Your uncle's bribed them with extra barley. The verdict's swift. You're to be sacrificed, offered to appease the gods like a Carthaginian child in a fire. Your family's not protesting. They're relieved, like a Puritan village casting out a witch. You're dragged to the river, bound like a 16th century heretic, and the crocodiles are waiting, their eyes glinting like lanterns in a haunted manor. As the sun rises over the Nile, you're gone. Your name erased, your story swallowed by the sands. Ancient Egyptian families weren't just deadly, they were a machine, grinding down loyalty and spitting out bones. Historically, humans have been their own worst enemies, from Roman senators stabbing Caesar to medieval clans feuding over scraps. The Egyptians perfected it, turning kin into killers with a smile and a spell. You weren't a hero, you were a footnote, like the countless who vanished in the Nile's shadow, their graves unmarked, their betrayals forgotten. Thanks for joining this brutal, sarcastic trek through the land of the pharaohs. If you're still here, you're tougher than I thought, at least mentally. Drop a comment about which family member you'd stupidly trust in ancient Egypt, and let's see who's brave enough to face this nightmare again. Until next time, stay safe, stay loyal, because your blood's not your friend, it's a cobra, and you're out of charms. Imagine a world where your survival depends not on your sword, your wit, or your cunning, but on the exact timing of your menstrual cycle, the pliability of your uterus, and whether you can convincingly bleed on command. Welcome to the imperial harem, where women fought not with daggers, but with perfumed poisons, embroidered sabotage, and, yes, blood on silk sheets. Today, we dive headfirst into the absurd, brutal, and occasionally ridiculous lives of imperial concubines. This isn't just history. This is high-stakes reproductive gladiator combat, and losing means death, or worse, irrelevance. Let's rewind to ancient China, a realm of jade palaces, bureaucratic scrolls longer than your lifespan, and emperors with more concubines than the number of teeth in your head. At the pinnacle of opulence, behind intricately carved red lacquered doors, the harem, a palace within the palace, housed hundreds, sometimes thousands, of women. Each woman bore one singular, suffocating purpose: bear the emperor a male heir, or, if that failed, at least not get executed for trying. Contrary to Hollywood's visions of idle beauty and silk-clad lounging, concubinage was a blood sport. No one just lounged. They plotted, calculated, schemed like Wall Street traders on performance-enhancing herbs. The competition wasn't just about affection, it was survival. The stakes? Favor meant power, power meant wealth. Wealth meant your family didn't mysteriously vanish in a tax scandal orchestrated by your enemies. So yes, that smile a concubine gave the emperor at dinner, that was a declaration of war. Now, here's where things get messy, literally. The emperor, overwhelmed by his calendar of nightly assignations, needed a system. After all, he was a busy man. Wars to wage, eunuchs to distrust, porcelain vases to admire. So the harem instituted a schedule, meticulously maintained by the Bureau of Harmonious Affairs. Women were wheeled in, quite literally, on carts like human delivery packages, their names recorded, their bodies inspected. If that sounds dehumanizing, congratulations, you're paying attention. One crucial element of this inspection process was proof of menstruation. Why? Because a woman could only be visited by the emperor when she was clean. No periods, no pregnancy. But also, if a woman could prove she bled during the emperor's visit, it strongly suggested the emperor was the father of any ensuing child. So naturally, enter the blood-soaked battlefield of silk sheets. Concubines developed ingenious, borderline grotesque methods to manipulate this blood logic. Pig's blood, chicken blood, strategic cutting. anything to convince the palace medics that this blood was the holy grail of imperial reproduction. It was a dangerous game. Caught faking blood, death, miscalculate, and actually be pregnant by someone not the emperor. Death with bonus torture, fail to produce a son, exile, or the glamorous life of forced retirement in a cold, unlit corner of the palace. Imagine playing roulette, but all the numbers except one mean your head on a pike. But why, you ask, did emperors need so many concubines? Because ancient monarchs weren't just rulers, they were divine symbols. And a divine man needs divine virility. Nothing says heaven's mandate like a harem the size of a small army. More concubines meant more sons, more alliances, and more proof that the emperor's, heavenly mandate was alive and well. And if it wasn't, if the emperor failed to produce heirs, then the court would murmur, the omens would turn sour, and some ambitious cousin would suddenly find a divine dream, naming him rightful ruler. Thus, concubines became pawns and players in the same breath. Their bodies were currency, their wombs battlegrounds, their blood, both literal and symbolic, was their weapon, and their curse. One particularly notorious example comes from the Tang dynasty, an era of dazzling culture, poetry, and harem intrigue so thick it makes a Game of Thrones look like a tepid tea party. Empress Wu Zetian began her climb as a concubine. She allegedly killed her own child to frame the empress and take her place. Whether this is historical fact or smear campaign, the lesson is clear. In the harem, motherhood wasn't a bond, it was a weapon. Concubines lived under a suffocating hierarchy. Ranked like military officers but with fewer rights and more eyeliner, they ranged from the lowly Kairin, whose job was mostly to look pretty and not die, up to the Guifei, the noble consort, one step below empress, and 2 steps above, potentially, poisoned by jealous rivals. Every promotion meant a better room, better food, better silk, and more eyes watching your every move. Your family might receive land, titles, or, if you were truly lucky, protection from the ravenous tax system. But that was only if you succeeded. Fail, and your family might be disgraced, your brothers imprisoned, your father quietly encouraged to commit honorable suicide. Blood on the sheets wasn't just a monthly inconvenience. It was political theater, and theater required props. Concubines, stripped of agency, became masterful manipulators of symbol and illusion. They bribed palace servants to supply them with animal blood, or to forge medical reports. Some used sharp hairpins to produce the needed red evidence. Others secretly gave birth to stillborn children, then claimed miscarriage from imperial conception, gambling their very lives on a performance of grief. Meanwhile, the emperor, often drunk, distracted, or simply exhausted, he might not remember which concubine he visited last week, let alone last night. Enter the eunuchs, those bitter, bureaucratic, surgically altered middlemen who held the real power in the harem. Eunuchs kept the records, supervised the blood inspections, and decided who rose or fell. Some were loyal, others sold favor like street vendors hawking fake jade. You wanted the emperor's attention. You needed the eunuch's blessing first, and his price might be high. Then came the doctors, the imperial medics, tasked with confirming pregnancies. Their word could make or break a woman's life. And of course, they too could be bribed, threatened, or seduced, though seduction in a harem full of eunuchs and cautious men was more about flattery and flattery's cousin, hard cash. The absurdity of this system reached its peak during the Ming dynasty. The emperor's schedule was so regimented that concubines would await their summons like office workers desperate for a performance review. Selected women had to be washed, perfumed, inspected, and then transported, sometimes naked, to the emperor's chamber. Some emperors were so indifferent they wouldn't even bother to look at the woman's face. One infamous ruler allegedly used his night visits as a form of punishment, deliberately choosing concubines he disliked simply to humiliate them. And all the while, the blood dance continued. Rumors abounded of concubines hiding under beds, bribing eunuchs to swap names on the registry, or sneaking into the emperor's chamber disguised as maids. Some succeeded. Others vanished without trace, presumably transferred to distant provinces or buried in the palace gardens. Out of sight, out of political threat. This is not to say concubines lacked power. Far from it. The clever ones could wield influence beyond imagination. A concubine who bore a son might become Empress Dowager. Her whispers could decide wars. Her letters alter the fate of provinces, but all of it rested on a foundation of terror and blood. Even childbirth, that supposed victory, was fraught with peril. Midwives could be bribed to ensure the child didn't survive. Rivals might poison the water or lace the mother's food with herbs to induce miscarriage. A newborn prince could disappear, declared stillborn, and another woman's child put in his place. Who would know? The harem was a sealed world, its secrets locked behind layers of protocol, silence, and fear. In this haunted labyrinth of power, the line between victim and villain blurred. Every concubine was both, a woman forced into servitude, yet clawing for influence with every breath. She might poison a rival today and be poisoned tomorrow. Trust was a myth, friendship a liability, love a dangerous illusion. The emperor might be the object of desire, but more often he was the prize, the scepter, the gateway to survival. Whether you loved him, hated him, or barely knew him didn't matter. His favor was your shield. Lose it and you are meat for the palace dogs. And so they competed, with blood on the sheets, with silken smiles masking daggers, with a loyalty feigned and fear buried deep beneath powdered faces. The world remembers kings and emperors, but behind every throne stood a chorus of women, locked in a battle as vicious as any fought on the field. Their war was quieter, their weapons stranger, but their legacy? It seeps through the silk of history, stained inevitably in blood. Let's descend even deeper into the suffocating, silk-draped nightmare that was the imperial harem. Because if you thought the blood-soaked theatrics of sheet-staining and backstabbing were the peak of historical absurdity, welcome to the next level, where dreams of power fermented in gilded cages, and every breath could be your last if your eyeliner smudged at the wrong political moment. Picture it. You're a 14-year-old girl from a respectable family, or maybe not. Maybe you were sold by starving parents or gifted by an ambitious provincial official who figured sacrificing a daughter might bring favor from the emperor. Either way, your life as a concubine begins not with silk and luxury, but with bureaucracy. Endless, maddening bureaucracy. Upon arrival, you're cataloged like livestock. Age, weight, skin tone, dental health. Everything is recorded by eunuchs who speak in monotone as they poke and prod. You are no longer a person, you are a selection, a potential vessel for imperial lineage. Your name might be erased, replaced by a title, noble lady, pure concubine, talented lady, each sounding lovely, but really denoting your position in a very long, very deadly queue. And oh, the training. You didn't just sit pretty, you learned music, poetry, calligraphy, because nothing says worthy baby maker like being able to write sad poems about flowers. You learn to walk just so, to cry attractively, and to suppress any urge to eat garlic, because heaven forbid the emperor detect anything less than divine fragrance when visiting your bedchamber for precisely 23 minutes. But beyond this courtly nonsense loomed the real lessons: how to flatter without appearing false, how to pretend to faint at the exact right moment, and how to cry tears of gratitude when gifted a silk scarf instead of, say, actual affection. Above all, you learned never to relax. To relax was to die. The harem was a boiling cauldron of petty rivalries, poisoned hairpins, and eunuchs with vendettas. One wrong word, one ill-timed sigh, and suddenly you're summoned to explain yourself to the chief eunuch, a man with no testicles but more power than 1,000 generals. And speaking of eunuchs, let's talk about this bizarre cornerstone of palace life. Eunuchs were the only men allowed inside the harem, their modifications theoretically ensuring the chastity of the emperor's concubines. In reality, some eunuchs gained power beyond imagination, becoming kingmakers and puppet masters. If you wanted to survive, you had to befriend them, or bribe them, or blackmail them. The smartest concubines did all three. The emperor, meanwhile, became an abstract concept. He was the sun around which everyone revolved, yet many concubines rarely saw him, maybe once a year, maybe never. Your entire existence depended on the fleeting possibility of a night with a man you barely knew. And if you did get summoned, the preparations were straight out of a horror comedy. First, the bathing, scrubbed by attendants until your skin felt like peeled fruit, doused in perfumes that probably smelled like fear and jasmine, then examined for blemishes, bruises, or anything that might offend His Majesty's divine eyes. Then, the procession. You didn't walk, you were carried like sacred cargo. And upon arrival, you were expected to present yourself, naked, silent, demure, like a gift he might return without a glance. And God's help you if he was drunk, disinterested, or in a bad mood. Maybe he sent you away. Maybe he took you, forgot your name, and never summoned you again. Maybe he mistook you for another concubine, awkward, and sparked a feud that would haunt you for years. Yet, if fortune smiled, if you emerged from his chamber victorious, you entered the next round of the blood game. Pregnancy. The word itself was both salvation and doom. Pregnancy meant elevation, possibly even escape. A son could catapult you from decorative furniture to political force. But before you could dream of little princelings running through the palace, you had to survive 9 months of paranoia. Because now, you were a target. Your food could be poisoned, your water laced with herbs to induce miscarriage, your midwife possibly on another concubine's payroll, and if you carried a boy, the danger tripled. There are records of pregnant concubines being accidentally pushed downstairs, suffocated in their sleep, or tricked into medicinal treatments that were anything but. Even more sinister, rival concubines sometimes faked pregnancies to gain temporary favor, stuffing their robes, bribing doctors, performing elaborate morning sickness theatrics. Eventually, the ruse would collapse, preferably after the emperor gifted them land, titles, or the public humiliation of their enemies. Imperial drama at its finest. If you did give birth, the baby was immediately whisked away, raised not by you, but by appointed nannies. Loyal to the state, not the mother. Concubines rarely raised their own children. This, of course, was to ensure loyalty to the throne, not to the woman who literally birthed the future. You could see your son, if you behaved, misstep, and you might never see him again. And here's the kicker, even sons weren't guaranteed salvation. A prince was a threat to everyone except himself, and child mortality was suspiciously high in imperial palaces. Some babies simply didn't make it. Illness? Probably. Foul play? Highly likely. And if your baby died, you grieved in silence or risked accusations of hysteria, disobedience, or worst of all, bad luck. The empress, meanwhile, was not your ally. Though technically above the fray, many empresses saw concubines as threats. Some ruled with iron fists, punishing anyone who dared conceive before them. Others played favorites, encouraging infighting to maintain control. One particularly charming empress allegedly ordered concubines to be flogged for giving birth, claiming they dared usurp her glory. Family dinners must have been delightful. And what if the emperor died? Retirement? Ha! Try confinement. Widowed concubines often became nuns in name, prisoners in reality. Forbidden from remarrying, they lived out their days in cold, isolated quarters, haunted by memories, paranoia, and the occasional ghost of a murdered rival. Or worse, you might be buried alive. Yes, some dynasties practiced the charming tradition of interring concubines with dead emperors, to serve him in the afterlife, of course. The logic? If you couldn't serve in life, you'd serve in death. Refusal? Unthinkable. Your choice was suffocation in an imperial tomb or execution as a traitor. This macabre ritual varied across time, but the fear never left. Even if not buried, you were retired from public life. An elegant term for exile. No visitors, no letters, no hope. You were part of the emperor's collection, and with him gone, you were a relic, maintained but never seen. Through all this, one might wonder, did love exist in the harem? Did any concubine love the emperor, or was it all ambition, desperation, and survival? Rarely, stories emerge of genuine affection. Concubines who caught the emperor's heart, not just his attention. But even these romances were tainted by jealousy, suspicion, and political exploitation. A concubine too beloved could be targeted by courtiers, accused of witchcraft, sedition, or everyone's favorite, too much influence. The harem was a mirror of the empire itself, glittering, brutal, deeply absurd, a place where a woman's value was measured in blood, where beauty was both armor and curse, and where survival demanded more cunning than any battlefield. And through it all, the silence. The enforced silence of women whose names history rarely records, whose stories come through in whispers, scandals, and footnotes. They fought wars no historian cared to document, wars of pillows soaked in pig's blood, of poison concealed in tea, of smiles that concealed daggers. But if you listen, Really listen, you can still hear them. In the rustle of silk, in the echo of footsteps through long-abandoned palace halls, in the blood that stains the sheets of history. Let's not pretend this madness was exclusive to China. Oh no. Across continents, cultures, and centuries, concubinage was the international sport of patriarchal power games. You could throw a dart at a historical map and likely hit a royal court full of concubines embroiled in schemes so convoluted they'd make a soap opera screenwriter weep with envy. Let's set sail to the Ottoman Empire, the land of minarets, harems, and eunuchs wielding more influence than most modern CEOs. Now, if you think the Chinese palace was brutal, wait till you meet the Ottoman harem. A gilded cage stuffed with women, intrigue, and a job description that included bear the Sultan a son or be forgotten forever. First off, let's demolish a myth. Harems weren't all sex, sensuality, and lounging by fountains. They were more like political prisons with a dress code. Every woman in the harem, from lowliest servant to the powerful Valid Sultan, that's the Sultan's mom, by the way, was part of a military-grade hierarchy. Discipline, surveillance, psychological warfare, and, of course, blood. Ottoman concubines were often slaves, taken from conquered territories or purchased from markets. Many were children when they arrived, plucked from their lives and deposited into a palace where their future depended on pleasing a man they'd never met. And if they caught his eye, welcome to the endless game of survival. Because the stakes here weren't just your life, but your family's future, your people's fate, and sometimes the course of empires. Now, unlike in China, Ottoman sultans didn't marry much. Officially, they didn't even have wives for a long stretch of history. Why? Because marriage implied alliances, and alliances meant threats. Concubines, on the other hand, came from nowhere, owed everything to the sultan, and could be dismissed or executed without diplomatic repercussions. Clean, efficient, horrifying. But, and here's the twist, a concubine who bore a son wasn't just some discarded mistress. She became the mother of a prince, and in the Ottoman world that meant power, real power. Mothers of princes, called Haseki sultans, wielded influence that could shake the empire. Think of them as queen consorts without the inconvenient wedding ring. And this is where the fun begins. Because in the Ottoman system, only one concubine at a time could bear a son. Why? Because multiple princes meant civil war. Literally, upon the sultan's death, his sons would fight for the throne. No succession by primogeniture. No peaceful transfer of power. Just blood, betrayal, and fratricide, preferably before breakfast. So imagine, you're a concubine and you've finally done it. You're pregnant. You're carrying the sultan's son. You've won, or have you? Enter the law of fratricide, a charming policy wherein the new sultan would execute his brothers to prevent rebellion. That's right. As soon as your precious baby boy ascends the throne, he'll likely murder all his brothers, including those still nursing, including potentially your other sons. The logic? Fewer brothers, fewer problems. Ruthless, but efficient. Now, as the mother of the reigning sultan, you'd become Valid Sultan, the most powerful woman in the empire. You'd control the harem, advise your son, and possibly orchestrate assassinations before breakfast. But getting there? Oh, that's a treacherous climb. Because other concubines are watching, waiting, scheming, and there's only one throne. Some women played the game so well, they rewrote history. Take Hurrem Sultan, also known as Roxolana. She began as a slave, captured from what's now Ukraine. She seduced Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, not only becoming his favorite, but persuading him to marry her. An outrageous, unprecedented act. Her rivals, dispatched, demoted, or mysteriously vanished. She bore multiple sons, orchestrated royal marriages, and basically ran the empire from behind a lattice screen. She didn't just survive the harem, she conquered it. But not everyone fared so well. Many concubines languished in the cafes, or cage, a euphemistic term for the gilded prison where potential heirs were kept under house arrest to prevent rebellion. Sons of concubines, locked away for decades, sometimes their entire lives, losing their minds in isolation. Their mothers? Powerless, watching their children waste away as political insurance. And here's the absurd cherry on top. In later centuries, Ottoman princes stopped being executed and started being imprisoned for life instead. So the competition shifted again. Now, concubines had to scheme not just for the son to be born, but for him to stay sane long enough to rule. Many didn't. The throne eventually became occupied by babbling, broken men who spent decades in solitary confinement. The women, left navigating a minefield of insanity and ambition, now shift westward to France, land of powdered wigs, rococo ceilings, and courtly etiquette so stifling it makes the harem look like a free-range retreat. At Versailles, concubinage took a more refined form. Mistresses, official ones, unofficial ones, layers upon layers of lovers, each vying for Louis XIV's glittering attention. The competition, just as vicious. These women wielded enormous influence, sometimes more than queens. Madame de Pompadour, for instance, wasn't just a pretty face. She advised the king, patronized the arts, and essentially ran France behind the scenes. And yes, there were rivals, pamphlets, slanders, poison rumors. You know, the usual. And while these women weren't bearing heirs, they were political tools, scandal fodder and pawns in aristocratic games. Their power rested on their ability to remain interesting to a monarch whose attention span was notoriously short. Fail to amuse, and you're out, exiled, forgotten, sometimes forced into a convent, because nothing screams punishment like a vow of chastity after a life at court. But let's not forget Japan, the shogunate system with its own harem, the uku within Edo Castle. Here, the women weren't trying to seduce an emperor, but the shogun. Same competition, same hierarchy, same ruthless elimination of rivals. And in the uku, women could rise to immense power, running the castle, controlling access to the shogun, and influencing national policy, all while navigating a social system so rigid you could be punished for laughing at the wrong time. And like in China, blood was currency, pregnancy, power. But with power came surveillance, suspicion, and the ever-present threat of being accused of improper relations. In fact, many women were executed based solely on rumor, because in a system built on reputation and appearance, a whisper could be deadlier than a sword. The through line in all these cultures? Women forced into a system where their value hinged on reproductive ability, where blood, either on sheets or spilled by knives, determined their fate. And yet, they fought, with intelligence, with charm, with sheer will. These weren't just passive victims. They were survivors, manipulators, sometimes monsters, sometimes heroes. They carved out slivers of power in systems designed to crush them. They became legends or ghosts or footnotes. Their stories are the hidden engine of empires, the backstage chaos behind every glorious dynasty. And their battlefield? Always, relentlessly, their own bodies. Still think history is boring? Just remember, behind every empire, there's a room full of concubines plotting survival, staining sheets with blood, and rewriting the future, one poison cup of tea at a time. Let's conclude this historical fever dream in the only way fitting, with even more chaos, blood, and existential despair, because the life of a concubine wasn't just a single, isolated torment. It was a global phenomenon, centuries in the making, and its legacy still whispers through modern power structures, gender roles, and yes, even those historical dramas you binge for relaxation. But before we exit this hellscape, we must travel back, one last time to Imperial China, where things somehow got worse. You see, concubines were not just victims of the palace system, they were resources, administrated, counted, rotated, and when a new emperor ascended, well, he inherited the harem. Yes, that meant concubines who'd slept with his father were now technically his property. Awkward doesn't even begin to describe it. To avoid this royal Freudian nightmare, new emperors sometimes retired old concubines to nunneries. But others? They were forced to serve in other humiliating ways. Some were repurposed as palace maids. Yes, former imperial consorts scrubbing floors, serving tea, or dressing the new favorites. Imagine surviving one tyrant only to be demoted to dressing his son's new fling. Dignity? Never heard of her. Unless you think concubines didn't fight back, let's talk about revenge. The most cunning among them used their proximity to power not just for survival, but for retribution. Poison was popular, because who needs due process when you have arsenic? Others resorted to blackmail, spiritual manipulation, claiming dreams, omens, visions, or engineering the downfall of rivals through fake accusations of witchcraft. Remember, all you needed was one eunuch or court official to back your story, and poof, your rival disappears into a prison cell or a shallow grave. Now, imagine the psychological toll. These women lived in a state of permanent performance. There was no off switch. Smiles, tears, obedience, all had to be calculated. A misstep could get you beaten, exiled, or invited to drink poison as an act of honor. Some concubines, pushed beyond endurance, took matters into their own hands, burning themselves alive in protest, killing their own children to save them from palace life or attempting escape. Spoiler, it rarely worked. And the kicker? All of this was happening in palaces dripping with gold, jade, and fine art. It was like being tortured in a luxury hotel. Outside, peasants starved, wars raged, empires crumbled. But inside the palace, the nightmare continued, with silk robes and murder disguised as etiquette. Fast forward to modern times, and the ghosts of concubinage still linger. Let's be clear, legally it's abolished. But the dynamics, the commodification of women, the obsession with lineage, the toxic cocktail of power and sexuality, they're still very much alive. In the early 20th century, as dynasties fell and modern states rose, concubines were liberated. But what did that mean? Some were abandoned, with no family, no property, and no legal status. After all, you weren't a wife. You were a shadow woman. Your children, often denied inheritance or titles. Your life, reduced to a curiosity in the margins of history books. And yet, some concubines rose again, this time as businesswomen, revolutionaries, writers. They turned their survival instincts into ambition, clawing out space in a world that had once locked them in gilded cages. Their stories? Mostly lost, buried under centuries of male-dominated narratives. But they existed, living proof that even in the bleakest systems, some found ways to reclaim agency. Now let's pause for a moment and stare into the abyss. What does it say about humanity that concubinage existed everywhere? East, West, ancient, medieval, early modern, pick your century, and somewhere, a powerful man had a harem of women whose lives depended on his attention span. This isn't just history, it's a blueprint for systemic control. Take the basic ingredients: absolute power, gender imbalance, control of reproduction, isolation. Stir, and you get a palace filled with women competing for survival. Their worth measured in blood and babies. It's tempting to romanticize it. Hollywood certainly tries. Silks, dances, moonlit gardens. But the truth? Concubinage was survival horror with better lighting. These women were trapped, exploited, and often forgotten, yet they shaped empires. Their children became kings. Their influence shifted wars. Their whispered schemes redrew borders. In some rare cases, concubines became rulers in their own right. Take Wu Zetian, the only female emperor of China. She started as a concubine, and through sheer ruthless brilliance climbed to the top, eliminating rivals, rewriting laws, and ruling with an iron fist. Her path? Paved with corpses and scandal. Her legacy? Feared, vilified, but undeniable. Or Empress Dowager Cixi, another concubine who manipulated court politics so masterfully she essentially ruled China for decades, hiding behind a puppet emperor in the veil of the great behind the screen. Love her or loathe her, she was a testament to the concubine's potential, not just as a pawn, but as a queenmaker. But here's the haunting truth. For every Wu Zetian or Cixi, there were thousands, millions of concubines whose names we'll never know. Women who lived, suffered, and died within palace walls, their lives reduced to ink on census scrolls or whispers in palace gossip. And the blood on the sheets? It wasn't just a grotesque tradition. It was a symbol of control, of validation, of the crushing weight of a system that forced women to prove their worth through their bodies. Every stained sheet was a verdict, fertile or not, favored or forgotten, alive or marked for death. So the next time you stroll through a museum, gaze at a painting of a serene concubine, or watch a period drama filled with swooning ladies in waiting, remember the truth behind the silk. Fear, ambition, agony, and resilience. Because history isn't just kings and battles, it's also the desperate tears of a concubine praying for a son. The cold calculation of a woman who knows tonight might be her last. The quiet triumph of surviving one more day. And somewhere, beyond the veil of time, those women still whisper. Not for pity, but for recognition. For someone to say, you were more than a vessel, more than a pawn. You were human. You endured, and your blood still stains the sheets of history.